James Elder, spokesperson for UNICEF, who joins us from Khan Yunis in Gaza. James, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, what I'm sure is a difficult and very busy time for you. Just first of all, tell us what's going on around where you are right now.
Tom, weaponry. I don't have the military expertise, but consistent heavy weaponry. Only back in the Gaza Strip for 24 hours. It's my fifth time since October 7, but 24 hours, I've met a lot of people who are desperately hungry. I'm seeing again that universal symbol of hand to mouth, but just in the north that I've seen before, but in the south, in the middle area and so on. I've been to Al-Aqsa Hospital where the 3 drone strikes today. We've had children killed in Khan Yunis. Again, met a little boy in a hospital his home was bombed in a safe zone, and he was the only surviving member with his father. This is in less than 24 hours, so there is a level of despair and despondency, particularly, I think, Tom, particularly around the lack of food for everyone across the Strip, north to south, east to west. It is the one unifying thing that people speak about, spending their days, how do I get food, or how do I get anything resembling nutrition?
Okay, so clearly you paint a picture of widespread desperation, malnutrition. Clearly this is having a particular impact on children and the most vulnerable segments of the population. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I spoke recently to a colleague who's a nutritional expert who made it very clear to me this situation continues, and by that I mean a continued blockage of aid, not allowing the amount that is required, the amount that we got working through ceasefire, showing what can be done. If this blockade continues, then he said, we will see a famine. And once we see a famine, it's too late. That means that those deaths, those numbers have already started to occur. So we've got a critical nutritional situation. It's a vicious cycle, Tom, because of course there is now a great spike in diseases. Disease and malnutrition are terrible partners. That's what kills a child. A child who's malnourished is 10 times more likely to die from disease. A grave lack of fresh water. So all these things, but these are all man-made. These are all enforced. There's thousands of trucks across the border ready to go. And of course, as everyone knows, all of this within a theatre of relentless bombardments, of a continued war. Well, I hesitate to use the word war. In fairness, wars have laws. This is the destruction of a society, brick by brick, child by child.
Some aid was being distributed earlier on in the week. It was suspended today. We gather it may continue tomorrow, being distributed by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I'd like to ask you why the distribution process by them has been quite as chaotic and as violent as it appears to have been.
It's a good question in its most simple sense, and this is not with hindsight. The United Nations, every single arm of the United Nations, those people who've been doing this for 50 years across the world in dozens of conflict zones, made it very clear this is not a humanitarian organization. It is a militarized, politicized setup with a very simple design of pushing people, forcibly displacing people from the north to the south. At the same time, a veneer of humanitarian aid to try and quell that pressure that we increasingly see from Western countries about those increasing cases of starvation. So because of that, there is no experience. These are people with guns. There are 2 or 3 distribution points. During the ceasefire, the United Nations and brave partners on the ground had 400. Because, Tom, humanitarian aid is about going to where people need it. You don't ask a mum to leave her children and walk 15 kilometres. You don't ask a grandmother. You don't ask an amputee. This demands it. If you want aid, you go there. More so showing the level of desperation because humanitarian agencies are being blocked to distribute aid at scale. There's been 2 massacres in that site, around that area. It doesn't matter whether they're in that site or not in that site. You bring people to an area, you have a responsibility, a legal responsibility to protect them. But again, that would be under humanitarian law. This is not functioning as that. So the great danger always was that you weaponize aid and you have the risk not only of not reaching all people, we knew that was never going to happen, but you get these things. You are bringing civilians into a heavily militarized zone. That's terrifying for Gazans. And yet still last night, Tom, I saw large numbers of people heading that way. They knew there'd been 2 massacres. Imagine the level of desperation that you are willing to risk another massacre in the hope of feeding your family. Or as those people have said to me, their son went to a site to try and get food and never came back, simply because they tried to feed themselves. It's very important we explain what that is, because it is a veneer and is not humanitarian aid. It has a very clear political military purpose, and at the same time, it has a very clear aim to restrict humanitarian aid doing what it should do, which is getting aid impartially to everyone across the Gaza Strip.
It's great that you're there, because I want to ask you some specific evidence. We're being told by people in Israel that we speak to on this channel that the reports of famine being widespread, that hunger being widespread, are vastly exaggerated. How do you counter that argument being made by Israel?
It's very simple to counter it, and it's very important because we do need evidence. And that's what the United Nations deals with. That's why we are impartial and neutral. And so the world's most prestigious nutritional body, which is called the IPC, which has a range of partners, UN workers, doctors, trained people across the Gaza Strip to monitor, to do monitorings of children, to do monitorings of adults, to check the nutritional status. From that very, very detailed study that is globally accepted, that was given the catastrophic warnings, showing the level of deprivation here. So, the evidence is overwhelming because the evidence is done by an impartial body, and the most recent findings show that there are areas under that risk of famine. Shows the entirety of the Gaza Strip is food insecure. That sounds, like a technical term. I can speak to that. As I say, I've been to Gaza before, and I've seen that level of hunger in the north. I've never seen it before in the south, in the middle area, in Deribala, here in the south as well. So it is important we deal with facts. It's all we've been dealing with the whole time. It's a similar argument around something like, the looting of supply or aid diversion by Hamas. Again, there's just no evidence of that. That's used as a reason to create this militarized zone, but there's no evidence, and there's been no evidence. In fact, we've heard that from a former humanitarian advisor to the previous president of the United States. No evidence given by Israel. So facts matter very, very greatly here. And it is troubling. There are so many humanitarians on the ground and very brave Palestinian journalists who paid the ultimate price. The international press must, of course, still ask why, after 20 months, are international journalists banned from bearing witness to this, sharing the truth when it comes to humanitarian aid, potentially preventing some of the atrocities that keep hitting civilians.
So in terms of what you're actually seeing on a day-to-day basis, I mean, just some very basic question. I mean, do people look extremely emaciated? Has it reached the stage that the majority of people you encounter walking down a street there in Khan Yunis, where you are now, or perhaps in another part of Gaza, look like they're malnourished and extremely hungry? Is that what it looks like?
Some, yes, probably not to the level you say. And I think without having that nutritional expertise, if you had that, you're probably in a famine to see that entire population like that. But there is no doubt, those people I will speak to, people I know, you can see how much weight they've lost, or if they were thin now, they are gaunt. That's very clear. I've spoken to so many mothers who haven't eaten for a day or two because they share their food with their children. They give their food to their children. So it's both a lack of food and it's clearly a lack of nutrition. A lot of people say they eat bread, but you just never feel full for it. People are lacking energy because of a lack of nutrients. Does every single person look emaciated? No, that would again be catastrophic. And if that was the case, we'd be seeing many children dying because, of course, children are the most vulnerable. They have the most vulnerable immune systems just because of their size. And as I say, disease is 10 times more likely to take a child's life when they are malnourished. Remembering that state of people, if it gets to the state, of famine, it's too late. And I guess also this is not, we're not hundreds of kilometers away from somewhere. We're not needing to do food drops. This is entirely man-made. Everything the people of Gaza need are in trucks on the border. There are people eating very well 50, 100 kilometers away. That's what is so dire here, that it is a population being deliberately forced into this level of despair, which, war crimes are very clear. Starvation as a weapon of war breaches many international humanitarian laws, if that was to be found to be the precise verdict about what's happening here.
Okay, just going back briefly to the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is it unworkable as an organisation, or could the UN come in and perhaps help them and show them what they're doing wrong? If you were asked to do so, would you?
No and no. It's not workable because it will always be militarized. You will always be taking civilians into a military site. You will always be screening civilians. You'll always be choosing who gets aid. But more than anything, Tom, it's not workable because it doesn't need to be, because for the UN to go and help it, the UN just for, over the course of 2 months during the ceasefire was bringing 500 trucks in a day. We saw malnutrition collapse. We saw disease collapse. We saw clean water increase. So there's no need for a separate mechanism. And that's the point we must ask ourselves, why is that being created? It's being created with a simple purpose of dragging a population to the south. We cannot be part of a system that is part of forcibly displacing people. So to offer our support, would be to offer support to a system that breaches so many levels of dignity in terms of how humanitarian support would be provided. But equally, we don't need to offer our support. We just need to be allowed to give our support, allow those agencies who were from Sudan to Yemen to Afghanistan, who have done this for half a century, who did it 2 months ago. If we are allowed to save lives, we will save lives.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to have to let you go. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us under what sound like extremely difficult circumstances. Thank you very much indeed. James Elder, spokesperson for UNICEF in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.